Once you have the sadness, you also not just get the vulnerability, but you get the empathy. You can be empathetic and understand other people's pain. A lot of people that deny sadness, they can't see sadness, and they're always trying to fix. And a lot of those are the ambulance drivers. Every time someone's hurting, someone shows up with an ambulance to rescue it or to take care of it immediately, to fix it, to Band-Aid it. People are not supposed to have their pain. And why? Because we don't let ourselves have our pain. So sadness gives you empathy, gives you an ability to be vulnerable in relationships, and gives you healing. It's a really important feeling. And a lot of us have rules in our life and in our families. They're cultural rules and family rules. I worked with a guy who, he'd tell horror stories week after week in group. And I mean, the group was sobbing, I was crying, and he was sitting there just telling you stories. And finally someone says, you never cry. We're all crying. You never cry. You got a rule against crying or something? And the guy says, I don't know. No one in my family ever cried. Maybe there is a rule. So what we try to do is give him permission. Finally, I suggested, why don't you call your dad? Do you know where he is? He says, yeah, I know where he is. He's in his office out in California. I said, use a phone call. He says, Dad, he says, I'm having this problem in this group, and I'm talking about some of the painful stuff you know about, and I need to cry. Can I cry? And Dad says, can I send you money? You need some help, financial help, pay for your therapy? And Dad, he couldn't even hear the question. So finally, the guy, insisted, okay, just say, it's okay for you to cry. And Dad said, well, it is okay for you to cry then. And he went back and he cried. But it was like breaking the rule, and so many of us have that rule. It's just bizarre. Okay, let's go on. Joy. Joy is another one of those things. In fact, I think some families even have a time limit on joy. 3 minutes for anybody to feel joyful in this family. You ever notice joy, especially when kids are joyful, what do? They make lots of noise, don't they? Come from a family where you're not allowed to make noise, how are you going to have your joy? Giggle, run around, scream, do the Dr. Pepper dance. And I think that a lot of us got cheated out of our joy. We don't just have a hard time with our anger, with our pain, with our fears. We have a hard time feeling joy. Joy is the true healing feeling. Joy and laughter, change the whole body's makeup and metabolism. There's a lot of people even researching it now. They're researching pain and joy as part of the healing process of the body. And what they found out so far is that the tears that you cry when you're sad are different than the tears that you cry when you're peeling an onion. There's a chemical release out of the sadness, and that's a healing process. And then they're also discovering that laughter itself actually changes the body composition. And the people that have joyful lives are less prone to illness. And this Norman Cousins is a guy that, he says he basically cured his cancer, through laughter. He went on about all the funny, video movies and laughed himself into remission, he says. And I believe that it's really true that I think sometimes a cold is a cold, right? And it doesn't mean that, someone's beating you up or you're depressed or anything. But sometimes it's really true that we get sick because we've lost joy in our life. And that it is harder to get sick when you have joy in your life. But if you can't make noise, and when was the last time you giggled uncontrollably? Just laughed yourself until your stomach, hurt. The best group I ever had was in the wilderness. I used to take kids up into the, boundary waters of Minnesota. And then we'd set up, camp, and then we'd have a little group, and somebody was saying something. He just started talking, and I said, thanks, that'll be it, next, or something like that. It was just a stupid, innocuous thing, and we started laughing. And then he went on, and we got on this roll, and everybody in that group laughed, giggled uncontrollably for the 2 hours of group, and it was the best group. And the best group of kids that pulled together and did more stuff with fewer problems than any group I'd ever had before. And it was that giggling, that joy, that they knew that it was okay to have their joy up there, and they weren't going to be made fun of, they weren't going to be criticized, nothing was going to happen to them for having their joy and expressing it any way they wanted. And you'd see kids carrying canoes, like fooling around and having joy. And that's fun. It makes a difference in our life. Our right to it. I won a spelling bee when I was growing up. Now, I don't write on the board. You may have noticed that very much. I carry the chalk all the time. That's my addiction. I have this chalk addiction. See, I can't talk without chalk in my hand. We ran out of chalk once. I didn't say a word for 2 hours. And one of the reasons I don't write on the board is because nobody can read my writing. Now that's safe though. If you can't read your writing, then no one can tell whether you can spell or not. I used to be able to spell a lot. I don't know, spelling's a deteriorating kind of thing in a person's life. Well, anyway, my spelling is worse. Right now I'm beginning to subscribe to W.C. Fields' theory that anybody that can't spell a word more than one way is a real dummy. So, I can't even read my own writing either, so I mean, I'm safe there. I don't know how I'm spelling words. But the fact is that I don't even know where I was going with this. Oh, that I won the spelling bee, see, and I got this little ceramic statue of a boxer. I don't know what the heck a boxer has to do with spelling anyway. It's probably something a teacher had in the drawer, but I never knew a boxer that could spell. So anyway, I got this thing, and I came home, and I was really happy about it, and especially me, and I was just I remember being full of joy and explaining this thing. I think I forgot, my antenna being up and the codependence. And within 3 minutes, I saw myself poised at the top of the stairs. I had just thrown the thing down the basement and smashed it to smithereens. Isn't that poignant? But, well, I don't feel a lot of pain about it now. I guess I did then, and I have when I first thought of it again. But the fact is that was it. We weren't allowed to be happy. And if we made noise in the back seat of the car, the hand, that swings backwards, it would always hit my brother. The hand had radar. My brother could be on the bottom of the pile. He could be laying across the back window, but that hand would find him and strike him down. But the fact is that, we knew that we weren't supposed to have joy. And so now, it's still a part of my life that, I get scared if I start to make too much noise or feel too happy. And when is the last time we got to giggle uncontrollably, do the Dr. Pepper dance step? And I think even if you left your family with it intact, it got killed along the way somewhere for most of us. I think most of the time it gets killed in junior high. Now, remember when I was paying to teach back in the 60s that I talked about? Well, the school I taught in was a junior high. And I saw kids come in 7th grade. Now, some of them were acting out, like kids will do, and hassling each other. And some of them were too scared to do anything, including breathe. 7th graders, sometimes they can't catch their breath. Okay, well, then that's going on. And then there's some that are happy and joyful and spontaneous, and they're lovely kids to work with. 9th grade, I noticed something. I noticed the wasn't there anymore. I noticed that the joy wasn't there anymore either. And that they were making as much noise, but they were hassling each other and acting out more noise. And I figured somewhere between 7th and 9th grade, it all got pulled down. And that they had to act in a different way. They had to act like adolescents, whatever way that is. And that they couldn't be spontaneous anymore. And boy, George Carlin, this is a little sidetrack. George Carlin, what the heck does he have to do with it? Was once asked how old he was. Now, you're wondering, how is he going to connect this up? Well, George Carlin said, I'm 1, I'm 2, I'm 3, I'm 4, I'm 5, I'm 6. He went all the way up to 43, I think. I didn't know he was that old. But, it was a long answer to a simple question, right? But his message was clear, that we all are all of the ages that we've been. And every one of us has this happy, giggly little child in us that wants to play and make noise. And we have to let that child be there as much as we've got to let this 42-year-old adult be there that's supposed to be giving this lecture. And if we can't have fun as a child, and if we can't get held and feel warmth as an infant, if we can't learn to depend on people, and if we can't, have these feelings and have this process of being all of these ages, we're not living. We're just stuck in one little segment of developmental time. So joy is a key part of that. And joy is healing, no question. It's a healing of relationship, it's a physical healing, and it's an emotional healing. And I think it's probably an intellectual healing as well, spiritual, sexual. Incidentally, I didn't say that. That pleasure thing, the denial of pleasure and the infliction of pain, a lot of people mix up pain and pleasure. And a lot of people get their sexuality mixed up because of issues about pain and pleasure. And that the most common sexual disorder in our society is, anybody know what it is? What would you guess the most common sexual disorder in our society is? You want to take a stab at it?
Pain.
Huh?
Pain.
No? Impotence? No?
Pleasure.
No? That wouldn't really be a disorder. But, some of us it might feel like it. I'm having pleasure. Please save me from pleasure. No, sorry, Jim. Anyway, no, that's not. It's called disorder of desire. And in some ways, you're actually right. It's that we don't allow ourselves to feel our sexuality or take pleasure in it. And we don't desire sex. That's the most common dysfunction. We're not allowed to have our sexuality, and that's tied in with not being allowed to have pleasure. And I think that frigidity, impotence, and a lot of other things are not being allowed to have pleasure. Now, I think that sexuality is just below the eraser there. That's on the list. I forgot to write it down. It's a feeling, too. And sexuality gets tied into our other feelings. And when we learn to deny our other feelings, guess what gets denied along with it? Sexual feelings, of course. And that's more of the disorder of desire. And then also, people get pain and pleasure mixed up, and they get that mixed up in their sexuality, too. And a lot of people, are into the kind of sexuality that is pain-inflicting or pain, receiving. Bondage and discipline, S&M kinds of stuff. The truth is that the feelings are close. Even sadness and joy. It's like there's some people that talk about the peaks of your joy can only be as deep as the depths of your pain. I don't buy that so much, but I really believe that if you deny your pain, you're probably not going to have as much joy. And if you deny your joy, I don't know if that says you won't be able to have your pain, but my guess is it's part of a feeling denial system that many of us have. So my suggestion is laugh, do the Dr. Pepper step whenever you feel like doing it, and let people say about that whatever they want to say, but be a lot healthier. Anger. I said anger, and then I thought, if I'm keeping you late for lunch, you're going to be angry, so I immediately had to look at my watch. I subscribe to the Incredible Hulk theory of anger. Now, you don't really become a green weightlifter every time you get angry, although that would be kind of nice in some ways. At times, at least I'd like to be. But what you do when you get angry is you get the strength to make change in your life. And that's the key of what anger is. But most of us are afraid of anger. We associate anger with violence and abandonment, and we don't want the anger. Because if it's violence or abandonment, it's bad. And that's what we've seen, is we've seen violent or abandoning anger. And how do we embrace our anger? How do we have it? If we've been hurt by other people's. I think most men in our society are sort of acculturated to deal with feelings in a certain way. Actually, to not deal with feelings in a certain way would be better put. Men have a harder time with feelings. Men live like 8-9 years less than women. I believe it has a lot to do with that we don't have the right to express and show those feelings. But there's a myth about anger, isn't there? The myth is that if you're a man and you're angry, you're assertive, aggressive, in charge, macho, whatever, an angry man can kind of get away with it. And then if you're an angry woman, what are you? Yeah, you're a bitch? Yeah? Snotty, whatever. So the fact is that it seems like men could get angry and women can't. Not true. Women do a much better job of getting angry than men. What men do is they get passive-aggressive. And so now I'm going to challenge. There's a lot of men here, and I'm going to, look at yourselves and what you do when you get mad. Don't you get a little quieter? Maybe even feel a little picked on or victimized? You might slam the door, but you're leaving. You might turn on the TV, and be gone emotionally. You might just not talk. I'm passive-aggressive. In fact, say you're mad at me, and I probably won't say I'm mad back. I just won't say. I'll leave. It'd be an empty it's like fighting for me is real hard. I mean, I'm learning to deal with my anger. I'm learning about fighting. I think fighting is a skill that we need to learn. But I think I came by my passive-aggressive honestly, too. When I was growing up, I said that my dad was a rageaholic, and I was very afraid of the anger. And what I'm told, and I don't remember it, is that he beat me once. What I'm told I did was I went into a closet, and I stayed there. And I stayed there for 3 hours. And then when I came back, I didn't talk to him for 3 days. I punished him so badly for beating me that he never beat me again. And I think that's rather clever. I'm proud of that. I think a lot of us came from families like that. Not all. Very common family is that my mom is a raving lunatic bitch and my dad is this nice, gentle, quiet guy that just wishes he would be left alone, and I wish she'd leave him alone sometime. And if that's your family, you got schnookered. See, that isn't really it. what really happened was that they made this agreement to deal with reality and their feelings and child raising. And then every time something would happen, and he wasn't there and he wouldn't deal with his feelings, she would get madder. See, and he would always leave his anger. So by the time you see it, she is angry. She's got hers and his, and he's not doing anything. He's quiet. He looks like he's being picked on mercilessly. That's passive aggressive. It's a setup to make the other person look crazy. Any of you guys relate to being passive aggressive? Any of you? See a few hands. Yes. Well, it's a cultural thing. It really is, and it's killing us. And yet we also have sort of this aggressive system where when we start to get angry, that's when we blow up, and we think then that we're dealing with our anger. We're just a pressure cooker that's into control, that's letting the pressure out. Now, women can be passive aggressive too, and men can be raving lunatic bitches too. It can or both can be passive aggressive, or both can rage at each other. I'm just talking about more of a tendency. Anger is strength. Anger is the strength that you have to be able to make change in your life. And if you don't have that anger, you're set up. If you don't have the right to your anger, you're set up to be a victim, a people pleaser, a doormat, to get used, to be codependent, to always be taking care of other people and their feelings. Once you get the strength of the anger, you can start making... If you look at people that have made changes in the world, Ralph Nader, consumer advocate, even civil rights leaders. Like, remember Nader in the early years of TV, spit flying out of his mouth and angry about, they're putting gas tanks in cars. Stuff I never thought of. It never occurred to me to think about that stuff. But what's his anger done? It's changed the lives of hundreds of millions of people, right? Now, it didn't take me long to figure that Ralph Nader wasn't hundreds of million times angrier than me. And so if he could change that many lives with his anger, why couldn't I change mine with my anger? And then I learned that I do have some control over my destiny that's beyond manipulation and controlling others. It has to do with my being honest with my feelings, especially my anger, and that I really can impact and make change. And the other thing is repressed anger sets us up for a lot of illness, a lot of tension, a lot of anxiety, a lot of ulcers. Anger sort of centers in the stomach, a lot of eating disorders, a lot of the executive's disease, and the, spastic colons, and a lot of, intestinal illnesses. I really believe that when a person starts to clear out the anger and deal with the anger honestly and openly, that their health also opens up. All of these feelings are related to physical health. These feelings are physiological responses to things that happen in our lives. And if we cut ourselves off from them and don't take care of them, we're cutting ourselves off from our chance to take care of ourselves physically. And we cover, we medicate, we distract from.